In the blistering days of August 1944, following the breakout from Normandy, General George S. Patton's Third Army executed one of the most stunning military advances in history. The momentum was intoxicating, but beneath the veneer of tactical success, a crisis of catastrophic proportions was brewing. Patton's tanks and infantry divisions were moving so fast, 40 to 60 miles daily, that they were literally outrunning the fundamental physics of warfare. The supply lines, once managed from the Normandy beaches, stretched back over 400 miles, relying on a shattered French infrastructure that the retreating Wehrmacht had systematically destroyed. Every mile gained was a logistical noose tightening around the neck of the offensive. An armored division alone devoured 150,000 gallons of fuel daily, alongside 1,000 tons of ammunition and rations. This monumental appetite, coupled with the vast distance, meant the Third Army was consuming resources faster than traditional transport methods, railways, and scheduled convoys could deliver them. The advance had reached its culminating point, the theoretical moment when an army's momentum stalls due to supply exhaustion. To the generals in East Prussia, this was a predictable, unavoidable, mathematical certainty. They waited for the inevitable halt, planning their regrouping at the Seine. But the Americans were about to conceive an operation that would rewrite the very definition of modern logistics. The heart of the Wehrmacht's confidence lay in generations of military experience and a profound understanding of the logistical tyranny of distance. Generaloberst Alfred Jodl and his staff in East Prussia meticulously tracked the American progress, confidently calculating the miles between Patton's spearheads and their coastal depots. Their own campaigns, particularly in the vast, unforgiving terrain of Russia, had repeatedly stalled when supply failed to keep pace with tactical victories. They understood the voracious appetite of a mechanized army. Trucks broke down, roads became impassable, and rail gauges changed. The German army, still relying on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of its transport, could not fathom sustaining a mechanized advance across 400 miles of hostile territory with a destroyed transportation network. They saw the American mechanical advantage as an inherent weakness. Machines demanded fuel, ammunition, and parts, and without them, the machines simply became static metal targets. German intelligence reports on American consumption rates were meticulously studied. The requirement of 12,000 tons of supply daily seemed an insurmountable logistical impossibility. General Major Siegfried Westphal, soon to be Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, calculated that the laws of physics alone would paralyze Patton's advance within 48 hours. The laughter that echoed through the German headquarters was not born of malice, but of the cold, hard certainty of mathematics and historical precedent, a certainty that the American Red Bull Express was poised to shatter. The strategic genius of the Red Bull Express can only be fully appreciated when contrasted with the German logistical doctrine it circumvented. De Wehrmacht, pioneers of the Blitzkrieg concept, had consistently failed to solve its fundamental limitation: supply. Their doctrine emphasized careful planning, conservation of resources, strict adherence to maintenance schedules, and concealment. German military science treated vehicles and fuel as precious commodities to be rationed and preserved. In direct opposition, American logistics was a product of a different, more abundant culture, one rooted in Detroit's mass production lines and a philosophy of industrial excess. The Americans violated every tenet the Germans held sacred. They did not conserve vehicles. They assumed a high rate of mechanical failure, 20 to 30%, and planned accordingly with vast redundancy. They did not prioritize concealment. Trucks ran with headlights, blazing 24 hours a day, a violation of blackout discipline that baffled German observers. Where German procedure relied on rigid hierarchy and centralized control, the American system was decentralized and improvisational. Junior officers and even sergeants were empowered to make undesperate decisions, leading to a system that the Germans could only describe as chaos that somehow produced order. It wasn't military science as the Germans understood it. It was, as one German general lamented, mass production applied to warfare. The American army fought with the boundless confidence of a nation whose factories could simply replace anything lost or broken. The necessity of a radical solution was recognized on August 25, 1944, at a requisitioned French chateau near Le Mans. Lieutenant Colonel Lauren A. Ayers of the Motor Transport Service faced a room of skeptical officers who presented the stark mathematics of imminent failure. The traditional methods had collapsed. A desperate, unconventional measure was required. Ayers' proposal was breathtakingly simple, yet revolutionary. The creation of an express, one-way highway system. 2 parallel routes would be established, one dedicated solely to loaded trucks, moving supplies toward the front, and the other 4 empty trucks returning to the coast. This eliminated congestion and allowed for continuous high-speed movement. The name Red Bull Express was appropriated from American railway terminology, where a Red Bull freight signified an express shipment that received absolute priority over all others. The principle was clear: absolute priority, no delays, no exceptions. The projected numbers were staggering: 5,958 trucks operating 20 hours out of 24, moving 12,500 tons minimum daily. By any established logistics textbook, the plan was impossible. Yet, the crisis demanded impossibility. Within a minute 36 hours of the concept being proposed, the necessary personnel, vehicles, and temporary infrastructure were mobilized. On August 26, 1944, the first convoys of GMC CCKW trucks, loaded with 105mm artillery shells, began their 300-mile journey eastward, marking the operational birth of the Red Bull Express. The technical specifications of the Red Bull Express were a deliberate violation of traditional military precaution and procedure, designed entirely to maximize speed and volume. The core innovation was the establishment of 2 completely segregated, parallel, one-way highways stretching from Cherbourg and the beaches to the front lines. This segregation meant that vehicles never had to slow down for opposing traffic. The most shocking defiance of doctrine was the mandate for 24-hour operations with headlights blazing. German military doctrine strictly enforced blackout procedures to protect against night air attacks. But the Americans, supremely confident in their air superiority and prioritizing speed, chose to simply keep rolling. There was a strict no-stop policy, allowing pauses only for fuel and mechanical emergencies. Convoys ran at maximum density, with intervals of just 5 minutes, maintaining an average speed of 35 miles per hour. If a vehicle couldn't maintain 25 miles per hour, it was pulled off the road by mobile checkpoints and categorized as a roadblock. The drivers themselves enforced an unofficial, brutal discipline. Slower vehicles were immediately pulled off, and mechanical failures were pushed into ditches to maintain flow. The sheer audacity of this approach running continuous. Brightly lit columns of trucks across hundreds of miles stunned German reconnaissance. It was a visible, audible manifestation of unconstrained industrial power. A logistical tidal wave that prioritized delivery above all conventional rules of self-preservation or military caution. The unsung hero of the Red Bull Express was the GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, affectionately nicknamed the Deuce and a Half. This robust, standardized vehicle represented the zenith of American mass production applied to military needs. General Motors produced over 500,000 of these trucks by the war Saint-Ouen de Lis, greater than the entire German military possessed of all vehicle types combined. The reliability and standardization of the Deuce and a Half were central to the operation's success. Unlike the mixed, often specialized fleets of the Wehrmacht, the American transport capacity was uniform, simplifying maintenance and parts supply. The trucks featured critical innovations that German vehicles often lacked, such as all-wheel drive as standard, automatic tire inflation systems, and robust waterproofing. Crucially, the American philosophy allowed for engines that ran efficiently on lower quality fuel without complex modifications. This focus on durability and simplicity in design allowed the American Army to adopt a maintenance philosophy the Germans found incomprehensible. Instead of carefully rebuilding engines, the Americans simply replaced them. Where Germans rationed parts, Americans often discarded entire vehicles for minor time-consuming problems. The consumption rate was staggering. 5,000 trucks were destroyed or abandoned during the 82 days of operation, but American production anticipated and overwhelmed these losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports carrying hundreds of new trucks, ensuring that the supply chain's transport capacity actually increased rather than decreased, achieving something the Germans deemed impossible: logistics faster than consumption. The human component of the Red Ball Express offered a profound and often uncomfortable irony of the war effort. Of the 23,000 total drivers who operated the critical route, approximately 75% were African American soldiers serving in a strictly segregated U.S. Army. These men, who were denied basic civil rights, often unable to eat in white restaurants or use white facilities in their own country, were tasked with keeping the most celebrated white general's army in motion. They developed their own defiant culture, painting slogans like Patton's Blood Bank and Detroit to Berlin Express on their trucks, fully aware of the historical significance of their labor. German prisoners of war, forced to work alongside these soldiers, had their worldviews shattered. They watched African American sergeants calculate weight distributions and manage logistics with a competence the Wehrmacht could not match. The drivers' extraordinary morale and willingness to drive through exhaustion for up to 72 hours straight stemmed from a shared understanding. They were fighting racism at home by defeating Nazism abroad. Their superior performance created the necessary pressure for military desegregation. Finally realized 3 years later, the sheer volume of fuel consumed by the Red Ball Express, 300,000 gallons daily just for the trucks. Own operations was a number that General Oberst Guderian and other German commanders found impossible to reconcile. It represented more fuel than many entire German armies received for all purposes. The miracle that sustained this consumption was not solely the trucks, but the parallel logistical marvel known as Operation Pluto Pipeline under TOC. While the Red Bull trucks were pounding the French roads, the Allies were laying massive fuel pipelines under the English Channel. This ensured a continuous high-volume flow of gasoline from Britain directly to the European mainland, bypassing the destroyed port facilities. By September 1944, this unseen pipeline network was operational, creating a strategic fuel reserve that German intelligence failed to detect and could not comprehend. Forward fuel dumps were established every 25 miles along the Red Ball route, serviced by their own dedicated parallel convoy system of tanker trucks. This ensured that no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. German generals, observing aerial reconnaissance photographs, were aghast at the size of the American fuel dumps, which were larger than the Wehrmacht's entire strategic reserves. The Americans were, in effect, burning colossal amounts of gasoline just to move more gasoline, a level of industrial overflow that redefined warfare. The continuous, uninterrupted supply of petroleum products was the true engine of Patton's Blitz, providing a cushion of abundance that allowed the American army to ignore the scarcity that perpetually crippled the German war machine. German logistics doctrine was rigid, emphasizing careful planning and adherence to procedures. The Red Ball Express was its antithesis, chaotic, continuous improvisation where speed trumped every protocol. The high rate of mechanical failure, up to 1,800 trucks, daily necessitated an entirely new approach to maintenance. Mobile maintenance units, stationed every 50 miles, acted as roadside triage. Mechanics were given a maximum of 15 minutes to fix a truck or push it off the road, a directive that horrified German engineers accustomed to detailed, time-consuming repairs. Parts were cannibalized ruthlessly from vehicles deemed unrepairable, with the goal being to return the vehicle to the road, not to restore it to factory standards. Engines were often swapped out in 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When the designated Red Ball route became congested or a bridge was destroyed, the drivers and engineers simply created an instant solution. When the German destroyed bridge at Meaux was calculated to require 6 weeks for replacement by the American engineers constructed a temporary bridge in 14 hours. Convoys used a hastily bulldozed bypass road, detouring only 8 miles. They commandeered French buses for personnel transport, used rubble from bombed buildings as roadbed for bypasses, and even pressed captured German vehicles into service. The Germans observed this relentless, almost instinctive resourcefulness with amazement, recognizing that the Americans were building infrastructure faster than the Wehrmacht could destroy it, fundamentally altering the calculus of attrition and delay. The initial German laughter quickly curdled into genuine alarm as field reports regarding the Red Bull Express began to flood headquarters. Reconnaissance units radioed from the front, reporting continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers. No spacing, no blackout discipline. Estimated 1,000 vehicles per hour. These observations violated every known German military precaution. General Lieutenant Edgar Fusinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the endless columns, reporting to Army Group B headquarters that the enemy was operating a supply system beyond our comprehension. The lack of dispersal and blackout discipline, coupled with the sheer volume, led to a psychological impact far exceeding the physical delivery of supplies. Wehrmacht soldiers at the front could hear the convoys all night, every nighter, relentless, unbroken roar of thousands of motors. This continuous sound became a form of psychological warfare, a constant, audible reminder that while German soldiers were rationing their last 3 rounds per rifle, the Americans were bringing millions of rounds. The sheer abundance created a despair that undermined combat effectiveness. By September 5, 1944, comprehensive intelligence reports on the Red Ball Express forced a catastrophic revision of every German assumption about American military capability. As Field Marshal Walter Model noted, with growing desperation, they faced not a superior army, but a superior civilization, one that wasted resources because it possessed infinite ones, and operated without fear because they could move faster than the Germans could react. The true genius of the Red Ball Express was its exponential multiplication of Patton's speed, proving that in modern war, logistics determined strategy. German doctrine calculated that an armored division could sustain a 20 to 30 mile daily advance under optimal conditions. Supplied by the Red Ball, American divisions averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. This difference shattered German defensive planning, which was built upon the assumption of a maximum 30-mile advance per day. For example, on September 1, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 67 miles in a single day, halting for resupply at noon, where Red Ball trucks were waiting, and advancing again in the afternoon. This sustained tempo was impossible for the Germans to counter. Furthermore, the Red Ball Express enabled an unprecedented use of artillery. During the reduction of Metz fortifications, American artillery fired 100,000 rounds in 24 hours, with the Red Ball delivering every round plus a 20% surplus. German artillery, conversely, was rationed to just 50 rounds per gun per day. The disparity was overwhelming. As captured German officers later admitted, "We were not defeated by American tanks or planes primarily. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express fundamentally shifted the nature of modern warfare, revealing that the ability to supply forces determines victory more than tactical brilliance. American industrial capacity, channeled through the Red Ball, had achieved what the Wehrmacht could not, solving the inherent logistical limitation of rapid armored warfare. While the Red Ball Express was a logistical triumph, it came at a significant human and material cost, a price that German military observers failed to see or comprehend. Their relentless 24-hour operation pushed the 23,000 drivers to the absolute limits of human endurance. Drivers frequently operated for 72 straight hours, relying on stimulants like Benzedrine, often hallucinating from sheer exhaustion. Approximately 300 drivers were killed during the operation's 82 days. Trucks collided in the fog, overturned on damaged roads, and burned when overheated engines ignited. The material attrition was staggering. Vehicle life was drastically shortened to just 10,000 miles, with 30% of all vehicles being deadlined, destroyed, or abandoned daily. In total, over 5,000 vehicles were destroyed or abandoned, and 180,000 tires were consumed. The financial cost to the United States was approximately $100 million in 1944 currency. However, the American High Command viewed this expenditure as acceptable overhead. General John C. H. Lee, commanding logistics for the European theater, stated that they wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France. This philosophy of calculated, acceptable losses overwhelming the enemy through industrial abundance was something that Germans, managing perpetual scarcity, could not comprehend. Yet, the high morale of the drivers sustained the operation through conditions that would have broken a less motivated force. The Red Ball Express, officially discontinued on November 16, 1944, left an indelible mark on both military history and post-war commerce. It validated a new American military doctrine. Volume overcomes inefficiency, mechanical redundancy eliminates vulnerability, and decentralized execution enables speed. The final statistic stood as an industrial testament. 412,193 tons delivered, 122 million ton-miles covered, and an estimated 180 days, 6 months shortened off the war. For the German High Command, the conclusion was devastating. General Franz Halder, former chief of the German General Staff, wrote post-war that the Red Ball Express proved logistics determined strategy, not vice versa. Beyond the sheer military impact, the operation was a catalyst for social change. The undeniable, life-saving competence of the African-American drivers created significant internal pressure for military desegregation. Finally realized 3 years later, furthermore, thousands of returning Red Ball veterans, armed with unparalleled experience in managing the world's largest transportation network, founded major American trucking companies, directly shaping the modern interstate highway and logistics industries. The ultimate tribute came from the defeated enemy. At his interrogation, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, one of Germany's most competent commanders, was asked what surprised him most about the American forces. His answer was not the tanks or the planes, but the trucks. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that the Allies were not merely fighting soldiers, but a militarized society's total production capacity, a force against which the Wehrmacht had no defense.